half Sudanese and half Egyptian. I was born and raised in Sudan up until the age of 5, and then from Sudan we had gone to Egypt. We stayed there for a couple of weeks, and then from Egypt we flew to Canada. We arrived in Canada or in the Detroit border, January 12th, 2001. Um, I remember it was one of the craziest experiences because when we landed, North America had just gotten hit with a massive snowstorm. And as a kid that has gone from 40 plus degree weather to knee high snow, it was the weirdest experience. And we immigrated over, and that's my heritage. I'm also Coptic Orthodox. So for those that don't know, Coptic Orthodox is just a form of orthodoxy that derives from Egypt. The word Coptic derives from the word Egopt, or as we now know it, Egypt. And that's my background.
Nice. I was actually thinking about that. Would you mind telling the whole story?
Which story? Oh, the story of how we met.
And the no about how you how you ended up going to Canada in the first place with your family.
Okay. So like the whole immigration side of it. So my mother had lived down the street from a from the embassy, and every day as my dad had left to work, he owned a couple of pharmacies, but he also used to work for a Sudanese airline called Nile Safari. They were a transport company that transported goods right across Africa, from Europe to Africa. Mind you, this was the golden age of uh, of Africa and the Middle East, and in a completely different time that it was now. So she would always see him traveling back and forth, and then people constantly walking down to the embassy to get visas, and then she would see them walk home all happy or whatever it is. So she goes and she asks my dad. She's like, "Listen, like we should go and apply. We should go and apply to go to Canada." And my dad's like, "Canada? Like, what are you talking about, Canada? Like, who's going to Canada?" Mind you, my dad is from a very small village in Sudan called Kosti. It is about, and I don't know if I'm correct about this, but a 6 hour drive from Khartoum to Kosti. And it's a very, very small little village. Their family is very, very like tight knit and close and stuff, and like everybody lives around each other and kind of within the same regions and whatnot. Now, with all the displacement that's happened with the Sudanese war, obviously they've had to leave and kind of be a little bit more scattered. But thank God they're safe and healthy. Um, and so when my mom had brought that up to my dad's like, "You're crazy. Like, let's forget about it." And then she kept on pushing him. And at the time, you couldn't go to an embassy with like a short sleeve shirt. So my dad actually had to go and specially buy a long sleeve like button up shirt to go to the embassy with. And he's like, "Okay, whatever. Like let's see what comes of it." So he goes and he applies. And okay, how many kids do you have? 4 kids. Okay, cool. He goes, and the way it works is that you leave and then you come back another day to get the paperwork, from my understanding. So you come back the next day, and he would he to surprise the guy gives him the paperwork. You've gotten your visas.
Wow.
You're good to go. So we ended up flying to Detroit, and then from Detroit we crossed the border over with the help of our cousins, not illegally or anything. Just for the record, yeah, we came over legally. I pay my taxes. Don't worry. Um, and that's how we ended up coming to Canada.
I think it's a really cool story, and I remember it's just I love immigration stories, and it's one that sticks out in my head. So how did you feel when you first arrived? Obviously, I imagine it was quite a big culture shock, especially like you say, you were living in a country with 40-degree weather, and then you go to a freezing blizzard.
Yeah. It was definitely a surreal experience, and mind you, I was young enough that we adapt very quickly, and our safe place is our parents. So as long as our parents are nearby, we feel good, and we had a really good community to support us as well with like the Coptic Church here in Mississauga. Does a lot of outreach when newcomers come, and they really help with setting them up with a place or or even like setting up with the food bank. So there's a ton of avenues that helped us out, and we felt right at home because there's a ton of other Egyptian Sudanese families, and the church was established. So like we felt right at home very quickly
Mhm.
in
Could
that sense. I think later on in life, I think you do start to notice a difference, especially like once you get so like you're going to school and you've learned the language, but like you're still not the same as everyone. Your lunch isn't the same as everybody else. You don't like your hair isn't the same. You don't kind of wear the same clothes. Like I think there was only one other kid in my school that was of an Arabic background. His name was Mina. And for those that know the Coptic faith, there was one of our previous patriarchs, the Pope. His name was Pope Kyrillos, which is who I was named after. The name Carlos actually happened by complete accident because my real name is Kyrillos Iglesias. And in the immigration office when we had come over, the way the uh, officer had wrote my name, or my parents, I don't know, was Caarles. And I never understood the difference until I started going to school, and I still had to like spell, and then teachers would be like, "That's not how you spell Carlos." Or no, the first time it was like careless, and I'm like Carlos. I'm like Carlos. Like it's easier, because I had other friends went from Kiro to Carlos as well, in similar respect. But it was it was very hard to get used to that, because then people would be like, okay, careless, Carlos, careless, and I just started just being like, okay, it's Carlos, that's it. And then now I'm known as Carlos professionally. I'm known as Carlos. Unfortunately, careless is still how my name is spelled, which I am planning on correcting, but when I get the time to do it.
yeah. And around the time that you came, had the was this when there was a lot of immigration starting in Canada? A lot of newcomers were arriving.
Honestly, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I do know that like within the Coptic community, there was a pretty big boom up until like the 2010s era. There was a lot of new immigration coming in, and I think even till now, like there's a lot of newcomers that come in from Egypt as well.
Mhm. Which year did you arrive?
2001.
2001. Yeah. Yeah. And did you move straight to Mississauga?
Uh, Yes, yes. So the first place we lived in was in Port Credit, Mississauga, which is down by Lakeshore. It was a hotel residence thing, and we stayed there for a little bit, and then we moved down the street to Queensway and her Ontario area, and from there we lived in Mississauga our whole lives.
Hmm. And how do you feel about Mississauga? What does it mean to you?
Mississauga is like the only major city I've really, really known. Like I know the streets like the back of my hand. I know how to cut through any of the areas. I know if I'm in one area, I know how to get to the other area in the quickest fashion, or all the different routes. Um, it's definitely home, and it's has a lot of amazing memories where it's where I grew up, like where I used to play around Square One, or go on dates, or go out with my buddies, or bike around, and like where I get my car there's a lot of memories and everything, but um I think it's more so of the people certain family members, certain friends that I've had within the Mississauga area and relationships that I've built. It's hard to it's hard it would be hard to replace.